Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the delay. There were some technical problems to starting the stream, but now we are on. So welcome to this live stream tonight. And welcome to Millennium 7 Star, the channel that helps you make sense of military history and military technology. Tonight, we are talking about the sky jump, as you saw in the presentation. And it is a bit more hardcore than usual. So just to gain the good habits that we got some time ago, and we are going to renew those. So with much further ado, with no further ado, let's get into the depth of the presentation. Then after that, we will have the usual chat. As usual, we're going to stay together for a bit more for an hour or a bit more, okay? So now let me get to the presentation, and here we are. So let's talk about the sky jump. So, you all know what we are talking about, but we will explain a bit more detail what it is. We will just have a look at the aircraft motion equations that govern the motion of the aircraft for the motion of the aircraft on in the aircraft, and then just explain the rationale, because it's useful, how it works, and we just say a few words about the performance, how it does compare with the different systems. Most of the stuff that you're going to see comes from this paper that you see here on the bottom, under the Harrier. The mention, it was a paper presented in a congress, and that we're not talking about the paper, but it has a lot of useful information that I'm going to steal. There are a few other credits around the presentations that you will see. So if it is this paper, if not otherwise specified, okay? So first thing, carrier types. This is maybe something that you already know, but just let's go through this. We can classify the carriers by the equipment and the way they launch and recovery aircraft. So in this diagram, you see a sort of a classification. You see at the top. Let's just look at the right side, where there is the classification. At the top you have STOVL, STOVL, which is a short takeoff and vertical landing, which means that the aircraft can take off with a short takeoff run and land vertically. And this is the types of mainly light carriers, like the two Italians, the Cavour and Garibaldi, but also like the Japanese Izumo, and the new Queen Elizabeth is is one of these, and so on. Then we have STOBAR, short takeoff and barrier arrest, which means, and here the difference is between these two types is just if they have the anglet bridge or not, but that's not really relevant for us. So short takeoff and barrier arrested. So the aircraft takeoffs without, without the catapult. The aircraft takes off after a short takeoff run, and then it lands being captured by an arresting device, a barrier device that catches the aircraft, which is the typical cables that you see on the aircraft. And then you have the catobars, which is basically just the Americans and the French actually use this type of aircraft carrier today. Is the catapult takeoff barrier arrested, which is the classic takeoff system that you've seen in Top Gun and countless films, where the aircraft is thrown in the air by a catapult and then it is recovered by a barrier through a barrier arresting device, which are actually the cables on the aft of the aircraft carrier. So this is I will spend more time on this because it's something that I'm pretty sure it is well known. But here we see some examples of an aircraft carrier with a sky jump. This is the Spanish Juan Carlos, and this is the Russian Admiral Kuznetsov. As you can see, the sky jump is a section of the flight deck which is actually curved. It's normally at the bow of the ship, and it is actually curved and it is angled compared with the rest of the deck. Usually it is let's say a segment of it's a circular segment of a large circle, and it just few degrees. Here on the left there's an interesting picture that shows the development of the British sky jump design that you see from the early 80s, where there was just 7 degrees angle, and after very small to the one that is currently existing in use on the Queen Elizabeth, which is 12.5 degrees and is a much more massive structure. One thing that's quite important is noticing that the old sky jumps were pretty much just slabs of metal, curved, pointing upward, while more recent ones tend to be well-rounded, let's say they're not that angular. They're and keep this in mind for the rest of the presentation. Okay, so to understand how the sky jump works, we need to have a look at these two equations, which I won't derive. The last thing that I want to do, but these explain how the aircraft is actually moving on the deck while taking off. Let's look at this equation, which is number 6, which derives from the reference that was mentioning before. So if you apply the classic flight mechanics equations, and we resolve the equation for the final speed at the end of the deck on a perfectly flat deck, this is the speed when the deck finishes is governed by this equation. It's not important to see the derivation on all the details. What's important to understand is that the speed, so V1, is proportional to the square root of the mean thrust, and within this term thrust we mean the net thrust. That is the thrust of the engine, the thrust of the catapult, if you're using a catapult that just adds to the engine, minus the drag of the aircraft, which is still there, still exists. Okay? And this is the mean value. It is inversely proportional to the square root of the weight of the aircraft, the mass of the aircraft, obviously it's just the inertia, and it is directly proportional to the length available of the deck. So this is the N, but it is, and if you think this one is relatively intuitive, the more the net thrust, the higher the speed will be. The lighter the aircraft will be, the higher the speed will be. The longer the deck will be, the higher the speed will be. That's. I mean, let's say a light aircraft with a lot of thrust obviously also accelerates quite quickly, and so the final speed will be quite high. Hugo Nordin, we will get to that in a minute. Well, toward the end of the presentation. Now let's look at the second equation, number 12. This is the equation of an aircraft taking off from a sky jump. It assumes that it already had a straight run, and in fact the V2, which is the final speed at the end of the sky jump, depends on V1 that has been calculated here, so that is the speed at the end of the flat run. And then it depends from these terms, which are and then the effect of the sky jumps is included in this term, which is a bit complicated, but you still see that the more the thrust, the better the speed will be, the lower the weight, the speed will be. But what is quite interesting to understand is this term here on the left are multiplied by 1 minus cosine of theta f, where theta f is actually the angle of the sky jump final angle. This is a term that is actually reduces the effect of the thrust, and if you want, it adds to the weight, is due to the fact that the aircraft is basically going up, so it's going also against the gravity when it's going on the sky jump. So at the end of the sky jump, the thing that may sound that you may also already have noticed something. At the end of the aircraft actually doesn't accelerate as well as on a flat deck if it's using a sky jump. So the speed at the end of the sky jump is going to be lower, as if compared with the speed that if the aircraft was built with a flat deck, the aircraft would have been, which may seem very counterintuitive. So why do you want to do this? Because obviously, to make an aircraft fly, you have to reach a minimum speed to keep it in the air, no? And so if the thing that you want to do is reaching the minimum speed as fast as possible, then why adding a sky jump? It's actually slowing the aircraft down in the last bit of this takeoff run. It's actually slowing the aircraft down. So why would you like to add a sky jump? Well, the answer is not in these two equations. This is the sky jump is detrimental to the final speed, to the takeoff speed of the aircraft, but it does other stuff. So the first thing to notice is that if the V is the speed, the final speed when the aircraft finally leaves the sky jump, and it is actually tangent to the sky jump, obviously, there's also the fact that the aircraft carrier is actually moving forward. So there is a relative wind on the aircraft carrier. This creates an apparent speed for the aircraft, which is this VOD that is mentioned, that you can see here on top of this picture. So the actual speed of the aircraft is the combination of these two vectors. So it is not tangent to the sky jump. It is a bit bent down. And the effect of this bend down is this small angle called delta alpha, which means that as soon as the aircraft leaves the sky jump, the angle of attack of the aircraft actually increases automatically by the just by the fact that it left the sky jump. Now, when you are taking off, one thing that you want to do is taking off at the lower with an attitude which produces the lower drag, because do you remember this term here, this net drag, which is the thrust of the engine plus the thrust of minus the plus the eventual thrust of the catapult on a Kato bar, but on the case of the sky jump will be just the thrust of the engine minus the drag. You want to minimize the drag because it reduces the acceleration. But if the minimum drag attitude is also an attitude where the wing is not lifting, actually at low speed, to have a wing that is actually lifting, or you want to have a relatively high angle of attack. So these are two contradictory requirements. As long as you're accelerating on the deck, you want to keep your angle of attack very low, because that normally at low angle of attack the drag is also low. But as soon as you leave the deck, you want to increase your angle of attack because you need to lift. And by doing this on a sky jump, by the very geometry of the sky jump and the motion of the aircraft carrier, you just start doing that. It just helps the aircraft actually increasing the angle of attack. In a Kato bar aircraft, when you see the aircraft being launched, you actually notice that it falls a little bit, but also as soon as it leaves the deck, it starts increasing the angle of attack. So it actually needs to do a maneuver while leaving the deck to increase the angle of attack, start lifting. In this way, just the fact of using the sky jump increases the angle of attack. Automatically, the pilot doesn't need to do anything, or the automated takeoff system doesn't need to do anything. Just the geometry guarantees it. So it's inherently a bit safer than taking off from a flat deck. In fact, this is used in the following way. There is a deck run in which here, when the aircraft is on the sky jump, there is a partially ballistic flight in which the aircraft is in the air but is not lifting yet. So the aircraft is increasing its angle of attack to get to a point where the lift is equal to the weight, so the aircraft can fly away and possibly keeps accelerating at the same time, until it gets to a point here where the lift is equal to weight. You can see it here now. The vector of lift is equal to the vector of weight, and then the aircraft can start flying and then going away. So pretty much the sky jump also pretty much shoots the aircraft ballistically upward, giving it some time, also helping it increasing the angle of attacking, doing this maneuver to start lifting and then going away. This gives more clearance, more time to the aircraft to do the maneuver first, so and accelerating in the air, and also has some other useful consideration. For example, if the aircraft carrier is pitching up and down, there's more, or there are some very high waves, there is more clearance from the waves. So again, it is a bit safer. In fact, if you see again on this, if you see the angle of attack, if you plot the angle of attack in terms of time against the angle, you can see that, for example, around 6, which is probably where the aircraft is leaving the carrier, there is this sharp increase of the angle of attack, and probably at the top there is also some maneuvering, and then it levels up at some point, and then the aircraft goes away. By the way, this is a simulation, but it comes from a Chinese paper. I suspect this is maybe the J-15. That's the result of the simulation, but I suppose the simulation is should be pretty much what happens to the J-15. So yeah, that's interesting. So that's the key point. Basically, the sky jump gives the aircraft the time and the clearance required to maneuver, change the angle of attack. It's also helping the aircraft change by the physical, by the geometry of the situation, is also helping the aircraft to change the angle of attack. And eventually accelerate away and then take off from the carrier. And that's the actual reason for because the sky jump is a viable solution. It's actually detrimental to the takeoff speed, but this trajectory, this way of this possibility it offers to manage the initial part of the flight allows the aircraft to do what is needed to keep going. So this is the theory. Then what happens in practice? So if you start plugging numbers into those equations, start making analysis, it turns out that the using a short takeoff with a sky jump actually imposes some limitation on the weight of the aircraft, in the sense that the thrust-to-weight ratio that you need to take off safely with the sky jump is higher than the thrust-to-weight ratio that you need to take off safely with a catapult. And the depends on the aircraft actually, but they're quite a lot because the payload depends on the aircraft, the weight. But there could be a 20-30% difference in the takeoff weight from sky jump and the catapults. Also depend on the length of the catapult. For example, the French Charles de Gaulle has a 75 meters catapult, which is shorter, so the acceleration is shorter. Do you remember this equation? The final speed is depending on the length of the deck. If the catapult is 75 meters long rather than 90 meters long, like on the American carriers, there's this L deck is lower, so the final speed is lower. And obviously, taking off from the catapult, and it's quite obvious in the sense, taking off from the catapult, in this term T, you're actually adding the thrust of the engines and the thrust of the catapult with many tons of thrust. So that's obviously something which has a big effect on the weight. Since actually adding a catapult on a sky jump is probably very technically complicated, The short takeoff carriers have this limitation. So why are they so popular? Well, because building a catapult is something expensive and complex, and it is a deceivably simple device. Seems easy, seems simple. It's not simple at all. And also the American carriers, the production of steam is, or the production of, or for the more recent version, the electromagnetic catapults, the production of energy is something which is impacts heavily on the design of the aircraft. It's not something that you convert. So it's, you have to rebuild, and if you want to convert a non-catapult aircraft carrier to the catapults, you have to do a substantial rebuild, to have to adequate the power generation. It's a very complicated task. A sky jump is just, it's much easier. It's much easier to do, it's much easier to maintain, and so on. So this is, and so that's the reason, because it is so popular. Obviously it has limitations, but as the British at the Falklands have demonstrating, even a relatively thin air cover is way better than no air cover. So it is for everyone who needs this kind of things is quite for every country actually believes that an aircraft carrier could serve its interests. Even a light carrier, particularly with now that the aircraft like the F-35B, which are very, very capable compared to the previous generation, even a light carrier makes a lot of sense. Now, the question, why modern sky jumps? We will be, I suppose we'll be waiting. Why modern sky jumps are rounded while the older sky jumps were not? Because, let's go back, a sky jump like this generate with a spike in like this, with an acute angle like this, actually generate a lot of turbulence on the flight deck. So more for the aircraft, not a big problem when taking off, but when landing, it could be definitely a problem. And that's the reason why this is actually rounded. Plus, there's another small effect, but it's actually interesting. When we saw this, the fact the sky jump even just geometrically increases the angle of attacks, the angle of attack of the aircraft while leaving the sky jump, Think a second of the kind of flow that you may have around a bow like this. The relative wind will go up to go around. Like this, I mean like the Hermes or the Queen Elizabeth. The relative wind will have to go up and around the bow. And so locally, exactly at the point where the aircraft is leaving the sky jump, there is a bit of updraft that further adds to the angle of attack. So it is another aerodynamic, let's say, trick that makes the sky jump. Makes the sky jump actually useful. So, in summary, well, basically it's like cheating, because in this way you can with the sky jump, you can actually take off while you're still below your takeoff speed. So you're basically cheating physics. And this is, in few words, the effect of the sky jump on an aircraft taking off. So I hope it was understandable. I hope it was interesting. And yep, let's start. Let's start to see if there are some questions. I can share a link on my personal blog where I have a strong critique about aerodynamics of the American fighters versus Russian fighters. Yeah, you can. Yes, you can. The best place for doing that is in the comments of the live stream when it's gone. I don't know if it is intercepted by the chat, but yeah, okay, no, zero problem as long as you don't link a porn website. That's perfectly fine. Need a trebuchet aircraft launch system? Yes, that's interesting. It's not unheard of in the pioneering times of aviation. There have been some experiments like this. Would the land-bound airfields benefit from sky jumps to make them shorter? Potentially, yes. It's not. It's definitely not in use because normally you have you build an airport where you can build a runway which is long enough for your what you need to do, but in principle it's not available. Have you played the Kerbal Space Program? No. Good explanation, thank you. Why not combine catapult and sky jump? I think that mechanically a curved catapult is very complicated, and a short catapult that then shoots the aircraft into a sky jump. I've never seen anyone doing that. It's still a complex solution, I believe. There's another element, though, the fact that since the sky jumps is curved, while the aircraft is on the curved part of the run, the centrifugal force that actually squashes the aircraft against the sky jump, if the aircraft is too heavy, you have to need to keep that into account, in the sense that probably the undercarriage need to be capable of bearing those loads, and that could be it's a bit strange, but no, I believe it's more probably the problem is that it's too complicated. It isn't something that you'd want at the end of the runway if you were having an emergency on takeoff or landing and might be looking at overshooting. Well, that's true. That's the situation. That's exactly what it is. In the sense, you normally design a runway to be used normally. It could be in theory. I could see a design, I don't know, for example, in a very situation where you have Harriers, in a very austere situation where you couldn't clear enough room in the jungle to have the Harriers taking off, that you just pile up some dirt and you create a sort of makeshift sky jump. I don't know, but yeah, definitely. JATO, JATO stands for J. We do take off with jet assisted takeoff. So basically, strap a rocket on the aircraft and use it to increase the thrust. Yes, but it is a system that is okay. You still need to use the rockets and mount the rockets, and you don't know if you recover the rockets, and probably sky jump is still easier to have. So I don't think a short catapult leading to a jump would be particularly hard to manufacture, but it would most likely be less effective than just having a long catapult with no jump. Yeah, no, definitely. So let's go back a little bit. So aircraft carriers with sky jumps don't have catapults? No, never seen any hybrid so far. Now, Archangel, you can share the link. Just wait for the end of the live stream and add it into the comments. Okay? You can comment as if it was a normal video at the end. Just do it there. Probably it will be blocked, but I have zero problem in making it visible. Must be small advantage versus having the velocity, and here is all the VIF thing going on, very complex energy and aerodynamic stuff going on. Royal Navy must have some very well-worn slide rules. Well, to tell the truth, it's not terribly complex. And the advantage is not terribly small. I mean, if pretty much almost all the navies actually make use of sky jumps, that is something. Sorry, I got distracted. So if most of the navies uses the sky jump, is actually at the end of the day the balance is out. So they prefer to trade a little bit of speed with this capability of actually maneuvering very well and having the time and the clearance to do the maneuvering at the takeoff and cheating the laws of physics. The US only maintains about 3 combat-ready carriers at any given time, while the rest are under varying level of maintenance. That's true. That's correct. That's not, to be honest, not connected just with the takeoff system. Obviously, it's not just the maintenance of the catapults, it's that fact that keeping any ship at sea for a very long time is really taxing. So at the most, a ship can be at sea for 25-30% of the time, and the rest of the time it needs to be dedicated to refitting or training. Actually, for the US carriers, training is quite important in the sense at the end of a cruise that normally lasts around 6 months, 6-7 months, pretty much there is a big renewal of all the crew of the carrier, and the air wing is actually disassembled, and all the people are moved. If they need to go to schools, they go to schools, and this kind of thing. So it's quite important. Is it possible to make a 4th gen VTOL like the Yak 141 but with F-35 lift fan tech? Yes, the solution chosen for the F-35 is one of the many possible. I mean, the Harrier was particularly effective and particularly clever as an aircraft because the propulsion system relied on a single engine and was capable of vectoring the thrust, and that was a very clever and efficient solution. But having a vertical takeoff relying on other sources or independent sources of thrust used only for vertical thrust is actually the norm. So no, definitely, it's one of the possible solutions. Good evening. Good evening, Andres Martinez Ramos. Strictly speaking, the Queen Elizabeth just demonstrated the ability to launch small drones with a catapult. True, you're right. Something that actually happened, but it's just small drones. Many medium-sized drones don't take off conventionally, but they are launched by catapults. That's pretty common. And what has been tested on the Queen Elizabeth was the capability of having a small catapult on board to launch this kind of these catapults for small drones, which is obviously something at quite an important capability to a modern ship. Would love to have you to peer review my ideas as an amateur inventor for aviation. I don't know if I'm really qualified. Just try contacting me offline and see if I can do anything. High energy laser could make missiles and bombs obsolete. Hey, that's the umpteenth question. We keep having news of these systems that are actually added to and tested on aircraft, but also everywhere, pretty much, branches of the military, and none of those, no power laser. I mean power lasers. So they mean lasers that actually cause damage because they transfer so much energy to the target to destroy it. None of this system has been fully operational yet, and the first one of those go back 20 years ago. So is a technology that is maturing very, very slowly. So at the current stage, it seems to be still a bit early, but they at some point they will come up. They will become really operational, really effective. Because I don't think they will replace projectiles, but they have their capability. The quick steering and quick pointing, the very quick reaction, and the fact that they may have relatively unlimited rounds if the energy is enough is quite interesting. It's definitely quite interesting. Sir, Brazil operated 2 carriers, both very old and second-hand. Often they were brought back to docks due to catapult fails. Think Skyjump may have higher operational readiness. Yes, you don't have the problem with the catapults. So you have an entire class of problems that you are not going to have. Obviously, it's a trade-off. So if you have an A4, if you're flying an A4 from your carrier, I doubt that you can do with a Skyjump, honestly. Why is Russia developing the Checkmate with the Su-57 just entering service? They are 2 different aircraft, and they have a different origin. The Su-57 was basically a 5th-generation aircraft. The Russian take to the 5th-generation aircraft. Means technologies basically like stealth and data information exchange, data fusion, and network centric. The Su-75 is more Sukhoi initiative, done in full cooperation with the government, but is more Sukhoi initiative aimed, as it seems now, to the export market. So it is. So yes, that's the reason why they coexist. They're actually different. So far, laser defense only seems viable for short-range defensive systems to replace seaways, not long-range systems, not offensive weapons. Yes, that's pretty much true. That's what it seems to be. I mean, there are some elements that make it quite complex in the sense the atmospheric humidity is a problem with the laser. I mean, powerful laser can basically dig a hole, but still need to dig a hole, so it reduces the capability. Electric catapult, EMALs versus steam. So I think that EMALs is a very clever idea, and which was not really viable till 20 years ago, 30 years ago. As from what I've read, it has been made, no, it's been implemented on the Ford class, at least at the beginning. I think now they're fixing this in a very clever way. For example, one major flaw was that to maintain, for my view, is what to actually service one of the catapult, you have to disconnect all of the catapults from power. So that's pretty much with, rather than having just one catapult, you are having to that was going offline. You were having all four that were going offline. So that wasn't. I mean, that was probably a good way of thinking. Could lasers be used to perhaps vaporize parts of special design projectiles to increase their range, create thrust and speed, and still have a kinetic round impact but nearer hypersonic speed? It's damn complicated, I think. A rocket does that as well. Probably I would investigate that line of thinking, honestly, but maybe I'm wrong. Why aren't control surfaces on the very far end of aircraft to minimize drag for the same amount of leverage? Well, actually they are. Look at the F-35. The horizontal tail planes extend beyond the nozzle of the engine. And the same is true for the F-22, actually. And there are... well, this is useful actually to conceal the nozzle and reduce the infrared signature, but also it helps actually having more leverage. And always consider that you can do this obviously infinitely, because you need to have you need to keep the size limited somehow. Actually doing this also adds weight to the structure, okay, and moves the center of gravity. And having these elements that move far away actually tend to move the center of gravity of the aircraft in position that then may aerodynamically be complicated. So yes, it's always a compromise. It's not that simple actually, but yes, in general you put your control surface is as far as possible from the center of gravity. A linear Mach-E M346 Master, any good as 4th gen cheap fighter for developing nations? It's small and not very fast. Perfect trainer. Oh, AKM 72. Thank you very much for your super chat. So finishing the 346. No, it's a good cheap light fighter. We spoke about the light fighter in light fighters some time ago in a video, and yes, it's a relatively good alternative. But it is what it is. It is a light fighter. I mean, speed is a problem. It is not. I mean, the payload is what it is. The range is what it is. It is what it is. It's decent aircraft, nothing revolutionary, and even its Russian cousin is pretty much the same. So AKM 72. In your opinion, could the Eurofighter have been converted into STOBAR or CATOBAR carrier capable aircraft? Actually, go and watch. At the end of all this, go and read the paper that I've mentioned as the main source of this live stream, because there they do exactly this. They do some calculation of what would mean. They do some. It's very mathematical, so you need to give it some time. You won't find a narrative description, but it explains what would happen if you put a Eurofighter on the Spanish Juan Carlos. Turns out, don't spoil, don't spoil everybody. Go and watch that, because I'm not giving any spoiler. I'm not creating any spoiler. Say wouldn't be really. Yeah, there are severe limitations anyway. But if you want to understand exactly how much, yeah, go and watch the paper, read the paper. Have you seen the new James Bond film featuring HMS Dragon's missiles? No, I didn't. Oh my God, and now I need to go. Actually, I'm not incredibly great fan of Bond movies, but I really, it's something that I like. When there's a new Bond movie, I normally go and watch it, but I couldn't, because this is a very busy period, and even this weekend I will probably need to be working, and so it's a very busy period, so I didn't have time. But now that you say it, I need to go to find the time and go and watch it. We can make fairly pure oxygen from air via molecular beds for hospitals. Now just need power. Could we use O2 tanks to improve significantly mass flow thrust for gas turbines just for takeoff? No, I think it's really, really impractical. The tanks would weigh too much. It's not unprecedented though, but for a different use case, in the sense that to reach very high altitude, I think the Russians with the Mi-25, I think, did it. I don't know, for experimental thing. They had oxygen tanks for reaching very, very high altitude, but yeah, that's not the. Yeah, it's a very niche solution. The tanks are really heavy. In Spain, we have a problem with Juan Carlos. We are servicing it with Harriers, and the only viable alternative is the F-35B. Yet, no one wants to buy American when it comes to aerospace. Yeah, you don't have alternatives nowadays. It is what it is. Like how the British aerospace set converted a Tornado into a fighter would cost pennies in the 1970s. Okay, no, probably me. Are you aware of the Black Horse concept by Burnside and Mitchell Clapp? No. What is it? Let me Google it. So it's an SSTO, a single stage to orbit space plane. Should use air refueling to reduce the size of the spacecraft. No, I never heard this name. Thank you for pointing it to me. I think we are going to get space planes in 20 to 30 years, actually, and or near space planes, to be honest. Still think that is going to be the best placed. I still think that the best placed are still the British with the Skylon, but it's probably something that is going to come. SSTO have major weight and energetic issues. The rockets always work better with more stages. No, that's true. So there is one element that everybody that is hardly mentioned is the fact that taking off, but mostly re-entering the atmosphere, is a severe stress for everything. In fact, there is still no aircraft or space plane or any kind of reusable spacecraft that is actually reusable in the sense that can land and then take off like a normal aircraft does. So it is so having an entire system that goes through this ordeal every time it takes off and landing, yes, requires it's tough. Requires a tough unit. It obviously requires weight. So it is a difficult concept. So in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, is not great. It's not great. No, and by the way, then it's true. If you have different stages, it works better. It is use the rocket equation, and it is demonstrable that if you use different rocket stages, is more efficient. Is the best use of the propellant that you can do. Point is that single stage to orbit is terribly practical. So that's the reason why you may want to have a single stage to orbit, even though you have to overcome a number of technical challenges that are even harder than normal rockets. So that's rocket science is probably even harder. How the F-14 and MiG-31 cut as OWAC? No, I don't understand exactly the question. Okay, a lot of discussion going on about the MiG-25, MiG-31 going at very great altitudes using different tips and tricks. Is it practical to arm light attack aircraft like the A-29 with AESA radars as a self-defense measure and use it to guide AMS launch from a network dedicated fighter to deter attackers? I don't know. So in the specific, I don't know the concept. No, the concept could be, is probably light attack, putting this kind of radar, which is actually, they tend to be quite heavy and on a light attack is probably a bit of an exaggeration, but this actually gives me the second part of the question gives me the idea to point to something which is I mentioned recently and is becoming important, and at some point we will talk more extensively in a video, which is distributed lethality. So there have been some war games recently in which the United States, its usual invasion of Taiwan, no? And apparently the result was the United States in that particular scenario lost because and one of the elements that they that have been pointed out was the fact that they used to concentrate firepower, and concentration of firepower, concentration of assets is powerful, but the flip side, it is also vulnerable in the sense that you're putting a number of, depending on the weapons that you are against, you're putting a number of targets in harm's way, number of assets in harm's way. So they recently came up with this concept, since there is already relatively proliferation of data links and network-centric systems, then why the weapons can also be distributed. So if the weapons have a range long enough, then a target could be engaged by different systems. So for example, you have an aircraft that spots a ship and passes the target to an extended range ground artillery an extended range artillery battery on the ground that actually uses guided weapons to attack the ship, and while at the same time a submarine a couple of 100 miles away launches an anti-ship missile at the same ship. So the platforms engaging the target are separated and come from different areas. I think it's an interesting concept. When you start, rather than having points, you start having densities of weapons. Still relying quite a lot on technologies and communication. Again, is one of those things that you're not guaranteed to have in a large-scale confrontations, but that's quite interesting. US deploying drone tankers. Yes, the US Navy is doing. I honestly don't know what to think about that. It could have been the first service to actually deploy in a UCAV, but they have chosen to go with the fuel to the air refueling, which is quite, I mean, it's very important because the range is something important, and actually not having to divert F-18s or any other big platform for that mission is quite important. The drones are smaller than an aircraft, so they take less space, or may have even a few more eventually. So, but yeah, anyway, it's interesting. It's a start. What do you think about the Su-75? Is it that good? We know nothing. We just know what they have declared. Potential is there. We see how it pans out. I guess that's why the YouTube notification were late for a lot of us. Oh, I'm very, very sorry. I'm very, very sorry. This is this is a typical problem for YouTube, to be honest. Typical problem for YouTube, and basically YouTube said, suck it up. We don't know what to do. Take some time to send it out. Anyway, what time it is? Okay, no. So it's 10 past 10. Yeah, I could say, I'm saying, okay, there's a number of things, but yeah, there's a lot of discussions going on, which is good. I love when people actually come here and have a good chat, despite me pontificating on screen. I think is great, great thing. So I hope this live stream was interesting. I thought it was entertained you, and as usual, I really love to have these chats with you guys. And this is the I think I should eat something, to be honest. And you ever planning on doing a video on the Mitsubishi FX? Not immediately, but it's never been out of the radar. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And probably there will be a short video. This is a very busy time for me. There will be a short video probably on this weekend, and probably nothing during the next week, but then the regular programming will resume. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you. Hope all the best for everything. And yeah, what to say? I should always say too many thanks. So yeah, you know that I'm really grateful. Okay, bye. Bye.